need better music. I'm just sitting here bopping to these tunes. Hey everyone, it's Lunch with Mal, the day after afternoon tea with Mal. Hopefully, folks are down for more Mal. Just gonna quickly do my everyone post here. I've got it mostly ready. Let's see, is it ready? Yeah, it is. All right. Oh, wrong everyone. There we go. I almost sent it to the group called Everyone Can Quilt. I almost tagged that group instead of tagging the correct everyone. It's funny. All right, we're good to go. And folks are rolling in. So I hope that people are doing well today. I'm a little actually more emotionally worn today than I was yesterday, but I can do it. I can power through because I got it right. I do have Bailey's in my coffee. Mal's lunch today is coffee and Bailey's. So that's your indicator there for how I'm doing. Sound off if you're here. Let me know. Got a few people coming in. Kind of funny. Yesterday we filled up really fast. I think people needed it. I'm not sure people are gonna be worn out today or not. Good morning, Jeremy. So yeah, I've got a couple of topics today submitted by folks, and one of them is from Judith Mortimer. She asks, as a fellow mostly pantser, I'd like to learn more about how Mel built her universe. As one person asked, or Judith, and then Laura asked about my take on cleaning up newsletters. So I will get into both of those topics. Hey, it's Jill. Jill is now at Storyteller Lab with my picture. Oh, you're back to you. Thank goodness. Hello, Valerie Sims. Jeremy, you're figment. I've read that as fragment of your own imagination at first, which I think is also pretty good, to be honest. And hey, Alex, how are you doing? So yeah, I'm here, and wow, we jumped up a lot. Now everybody's showing up. Sometimes Facebook be like that. Sometimes Facebook is like, I'm gonna take a bit to tell everybody that you're live, and then we'll do it. We'll go with it. That's awesome, Pippa. Congrats and hello. I've done 124 out of 128 books are pantsed for me. So it's been a lot of pantsing. Actually, it's not entirely true. I take that back, and I'll get into that. There's probably actually been more than 4 outlined books because I have co-authors, and I think they outlined. So there might actually be maybe 20 books that were outlined. In my defense, though, I passed my part of those books. So I feel like it still counts. Hey Maggie, how you doing? I've been seeing you kind of popping up in my feed here and there. Looks like life's going well for you. Are you being Vegas this time around, Maggie? Jeremy says, I would say 80% here. I'll plot for super complicated scenes, but usually skip it. All right. So kind of a bit of a plantster then. I'm first going to chat about, Laura asked about, I'd love to hear your take on cleaning up newsletter lists and non-openers, re-engagement strategies, that sort of thing. I'm butting up against another subscription tier of MailerLite and can't decide whether to delete some people who seem to never open or just keep sending to non-openers. Doesn't that hurt deliverability? So the first thing we should talk about is, what does deliverability mean? And what does your delivery rate mean? So if you're using a service like MailerLite or something like that, of course, you don't have a dedicated outgoing mail server. They're called SMTP servers. Simple Mail Transport Protocol is what it stands for. And those servers are the ones that handle pushing mail out onto the internet, sending it to whatever destination it goes to. And SMTP servers have reputations on the internet. And their reputation might be like, this thing almost never sends email, who knows what it is, to this thing is reliable and sends non-spam email all the time. Or this SMTP server just blasts spam out all the time. Hey Dharma, how you doing? So services like MailerLite or MailChimp or ConvertKit or what have you, their mail servers are sending out a lot of email, and they have teams of people whose job it is to carefully monitor and manage their mail servers to make sure that they're not sending out spam, that they're sending out good email, and that their mail server reputations stay high. I know this because I've worked at companies that did this before. We had people who literally, that was their job, to manage the reputation of the mail servers. And so, of course, it matters a lot to MailerLite that you're not sending out spam, because if their servers get a bad reputation, it's bad for everyone that uses that server, because it means that any mail sent through that server is more likely to end up in a spam folder than if not. So MailerLite, in this particular instance for Lore, cares a lot more about your deliverability, your open rates than you do, because it matters way more to them than it matters to you. And in fact, open rates really only matter to them. They don't help you at all. Pruning your mailing list to get a better percentage of your people opening your mail does nothing for you, literally nothing for you. It only helps the company that you're paying. And yes, if a lot of spam is coming from a S&P server, then that will affect deliverability, because deliverability is not open rates. Deliverability is, does the spam actually end up in does the email end up in someone's inbox or spam folder or whatever? So we do care about deliverability. But if you think about it, MailerLite servers are sending out tens of thousands of emails an hour, or more than that even. What average author is sending out is a drop in the bucket. So having a bunch of chaff on your mailing list is not hurting the SMTP server's deliverability very much. You're a drop in the bucket. There's probably far worse customers that they have out there than you. So pruning your list doesn't help you, for starters. It just gives you a better number that you can pat yourself on the back for, and just be like, "Yay, I have a higher open rate." Unless you're up against that subscription tier and you're about to spend a bunch more money. Obviously, no one wants to spend a bunch of money for people that don't open their emails. So that's the only time that I would sincerely consider pruning my list. A healthy percentage, by the way, is about 30 some odd percent are opening your emails. More than that's great. Less than that starts to become a problem. So if I had like a 5% open rate and I'm up against a subscription tier, hell yeah, I'm going to prune my list. But of course, I would first try some re-engagement programs first. But also think about like how it goes for you when you're receiving email. Like I get email daily from some organizations that are sending me stuff. And I don't unsubscribe because I'm waiting for a deal, or I'm waiting for that headline that catches my interest, or I'm waiting for when they tell me they've got new cat suits in stock or whatever it might be, and I don't unsubscribe. I let those emails keep rolling in. And I might only open, maybe they send me an email every 2 days and I open one a month. That's not a great open rate. That's a 1 in 15 open rate. I have ones that are probably worse than that. And I still do open their emails from time to time, and sometimes do buy when I open their emails. So think of your readers like that too. They're not going to open every email you have. Now you might look and say, like, I've got this person that's never opened an email in the last year. Do keep in mind that you can't be sure, because a lot of mail software strips out all the tracking and makes it so that you can't tell if they were opening the email or not. So you could be removing people who are opening your emails and who are buying. Now, there's ways of managing that to some extent, right? Like you might say a thing like, "Hey, I'm pruning my list, so if you want to stay on my list, click this link," or something like that, to make sure that you have a list. You have like people. There's ways of like setting that sort of thing up in different mail programs. So then you can say like, "Okay, these are the people that click the link." But what if they're me, and I only open 1 in 15, and I never saw that? I might not do it. And if you had like a passive aggressive subject line that was like, why don't you love me anymore, or something like that, I'll probably unsubscribe just for a passive aggressive subject line. So you can't like force people to interact with your email to get you. So what do you do to deal with that? Well, one, you could go to a cheaper mail provider. I don't know Wix's current pricing. Wix is a company that does website hosting and they have mail stuff. I pay $25 a month to Wix for unlimited newsletter size and unlimited sends. that is an older program they don't offer anymore. I bet you that right now that probably costs unlimited is probably closer to $100 a month right now from them. Which you might look at that and be like, crap, I'm still paying more. We were paying MailChimp $250 a month for a 30,000 person tier that we were on between Jill and I together with all of our pen names. So you might just consider changing providers, or maybe you break it up and maybe there's a provider out there that like gives a really good deal on up to 5,000, and you put your people that don't seem to open very much over there, and your main list is somewhere else. There's ways you could deal with that, or you could do something like move to Substack. I've been talking about Substack a lot lately because Substack's like your newsletter, and Patreon had a baby. Doesn't cost you anything to sign up for Substack. There doesn't appear to be any limits on sending emails from Substack. No one has told me about any. I've done some cursory digging. I've not actually tried to send a shit ton of emails and see what happens. But you can look at their plans and their pricing for that. The way Substack makes money is you create tiers for like exclusive content, and then they take a cut from the tier. So that's how they work. But you can have an unlimited mailing list size there, or maybe that's where you put your whole list and you hit that like once a month or less, and then your main people that you hit every week or something stay on MailerLite or something. So that's one of the ways you could deal with that too. But then how do we keep up engagement and not get ourselves in this situation in the first place? So there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. One of them is really study your subject lines. Like take an hour or two and go back and look at your subject lines that are getting you to click or getting you the clicks. Which subject lines had the best open rates? Now, a lot of them are probably going to be releases. So maybe discount the releases or look at the releases separately. Like which of my release subject lines got me the most opens and which of my non-release subject lines got me the most opens. Because if you just go straight up by subject lines, your releases are probably going to win out, and that's not going to give you a lot of good information. Also, go and look at the author emails you get. Put them all in a folder or something like that, and just go through them and be like, which ones did I click on? And look for things that are grabbing you. Because ideally, you are probably similar to your readers. So if it grabs you, probably grabs your readers. And of course, if you're looking ones from other authors, you could be looking at authors in the same genre as you primarily, and then perhaps branch out afterward and look at authors in other genres. So that's one thing. Improve your subject line. Subject line is the most important thing you can do. And the next thing you can do is you can ask questions. Questions are a great way to build up, to build engagement and to get people to respond to you. One of the best things you can do for your newsletter is get people to respond. Because if someone responds to an email they got, like 99% of mail programs will whitelist that sender. And so when you're whitelisted, you are exempt from all spam rules, unless they were to write some sort of explicit spam rule for you. Like the user went in and said, any emails from Mallory, send them to spam. I don't give a shit, kind of thing. But by default, if you were to respond to an email from me, your mail software will whitelist my email address, and now my stuff will always go to your inbox. So how do you get people to respond? Well, the best thing you can do is ask people for their opinion. People love to give their opinion, or ask people to talk about themselves, because we all love to talk about ourselves too. That's why I'm here. So the best way to get responses, is these two things you've noticed. They would involve asking questions that don't have yes or no answers. If you ask a question that has a yes or no answer, people just won't respond. But if you ask a question that requires them to give an answer, then they will. Like a great one I did one time is I sent an email and said, like, I've just finished rewatching Firefly, which is a TV series, and the movie Serenity. What do you guys recommend I watch to fill the Firefly-shaped hole in my heart? And I got so many responses for different shows. I could watch different sci-fi shows. My next email included a chart of the most recommended shows, because I had hundreds of responses from people talking about that. So it can really work. It can work really well for you to do that sort of thing. I write like hard military science fiction, and one time I said, like, check out my garden. I've been working really hard on this, and it gets me thinking a lot about terraforming other worlds and the process that you'd go through for that sort of thing, like how hard it is to grow a truly verdant and vibrant garden where plants have symbiotic relationships and stuff like that. It's a lot more than just like landing on a world and sprinkling a bunch of seeds. You have to have so many components. And so I said, like, hey, share pictures of your garden with me, or your backyard. And I got so many guys you know, because my main readership are guys, and they're like older guys. You wouldn't think that they'd be like all about the gardening. They were into their gardens, and I got so much stuff from them, and actually made like I did like I didn't do like my favorite, but I did like gardens that I really liked certain things, and like I loved this thing in this garden and this thing in this garden and whatnot, and got some more content out of it that way too. Um, all right, I am going to let me just catch up on comments here. Jeremy says someone signed up for my reader magnet, then marked me as spam. I got pretty upset about it and contacted support, see what I could do to justify the spam complaint. The person I spoke to told me my account was in great standing and that I should be proud of my numbers. Open rate around 20%. Yeah, that's actually still really good. Jill says I like Email Octopus. Yep, that's always a great option too. And it uses the AWS mail servers, so you can blast a lot of emails through those. Alex said they're just signing up for Substack. Jeremy said, what sort of subject lines do you suggest? Mine are generic. Jeremy Fabiano newsletter November. Yeah, you mean you don't really put that in your subject line, do you, Jeremy? Because your name is going to show up already above that. Your name comes with the email, and the date comes with the email too. So you haven't provided any new information by having that. I mean, like a great subject line would be like, I mean, don't get too clickbaity, but you can be a little bit clickbaity. Like, you wouldn't believe what I saw the other day, or like one of my characters, like, you're not gonna, what Tanis just did is gonna blow your minds, or something like that. You know, you could do stuff with your characters. You could be like, you could write a book thing like I have finally defeated this book, you know, or I climbed the mountain that is this book. I'm standing on the top. You guys are gonna love it. I do one where I when books are coming out, I post things my editor has said, Jen. So I've emails that go like shit that Jen said, and I do post in my Facebook group as well. Ones were like, what do I watch after Firefly was another good one. What's your favorite show? I terraformed my garden. How's yours look? Stuff like that. You know, stuff that like is engaging and has questions built into it are really the best ways to go. Emma Luna says, I just started a new section in my newsletter called My Books in the Wild. I ask people to send me pictures of my books on their shelves or when they're reading on their Kindle, etc. And then each newsletter, I pick one to share. I tag the person in too. That is a fabulous idea, Emma. I love that. Kate says, my father-in-law is very into his garden, right? I feel like there's an age where men become very garden oriented. I've sort of discovered this. I've been super garden oriented since I was a teen. We had a 1 acre yard growing up, and I took over the yard and claimed it as mine when I was like 14 years old, and or maybe even younger, and kind of took it over. So those are totally some things you can do to help engage your newsletter and bring them up. And like I said, the best thing to do is look at what's grabbing you. Go look in your inbox. You're going to have all the examples right there. But or here's the other thing: look at the best YouTube thumbnails. Go on YouTube and look at thumbnails that are attracting you. Look at how they're structuring them. This is like subject lines, taglines, TikTok hooks, YouTube thumbnails. It's all the same thing. Ad headlines. It's all the same thing. It's like how do you pull people in and make them interested without being too clickbaity or too cringe? Like how can you there's a balance in there, and it honestly involves a lot of study. You know, I can give you ones that you can use, but you're going to need more. So you are going to want to study and see what you can do with that. So those are my thoughts on that. Don't prune your list. Never prune your list. Just figure out ways to make the situation work for you. Where you maybe you bifurcate your list and you move some parts to another place. Like maybe you take all your people that you got from whenever you get people from like a multi-author promo on BookFunnel or something like that. You put them into one place, and then everybody that responds a lot there, you then move them over to your main place. And people that don't respond go off to the other place. Like you can do some stuff to save yourself some money because newsletters can get expensive. But I really think that Substack is actually like a top-notch scenario. I actually think that a lot of authors could replace their entire website with Substack. Free website, free newsletter, Patreon add-on. I think it's like, it seems too good to be true. That's why I'm actually going to do a webinar shortly where I'm going to build a website on Substack. I'm going to build the whole thing, like in a webinar, to walk through the whole thing. Because I really feel like authors need good websites, but we don't need expensive websites. So I'm really curious if Substack could actually be like this one ring to rule them all sort of situation for us there. All right, so let's talk universe. It's universe time. How did I build a massive universe without plotting, really? So I talked about a little bit yesterday when we had afternoon tea with Mel because we all needed to pick me up. Speaking of pick me up, a little more of my Bailey's coffee here. So it's interesting when I produced. I should find this cover and show it to you guys. It's a hoot. My very first cover. If you think that I had it all figured out from day one, you would be wrong. I didn't know what I was doing when I first started. Let's see. OutSystem. Archive. Come on. Where's that cringe? Let's find it. There we go. All right. Let me just get a window open that I can share this in. Open with Chrome. Open with Chrome. And then I need to find the current cover here too, because I feel like that's an important part of this process. Two shakes of a lamb's leg or lamb's tail. I can't remember. Two shakes of a lamb's tail. I have it noted which it is, so I can get it right more often. All right, and then this. All right, so now to share my screen. Present. Oh, I thought there was a new comment, but I don't see anything. Okay. Share screen. Window. So here is my very first cover that I put out in, let me turn off the branding stuff here, get it out of the way. Not that. There we are. I guess it's not really covering anything up too much. But yeah, so there's my very first cover that I did back in 2012. Not the greatest cover, because this is a book that takes place in the year 4123. But I wanted to make it kind of like I was kind of trying to go for a retro feel, like, you know, Buck Rogers in the year, whatever the heck it was. So yeah, that was a thing that I did. And then this is actually what the full wrap looked like. And it was kind of cool, right? You know, it was kind of a neat wrap. I still have some of these. But the thing that I did that I think is most noteworthy here is I wrote an Aeon 14 novel as a subtitle on this cover. Because what I wanted to do, what I knew I was going to do, I knew I was going to build a lot of books. I was going to build a universe right from the get-go. I was like, this is a big thing, and I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm going to present this as though it is part of a massive universe from day one. It's just in my head to start with. It's coming. It's going to make its way out there. So I did that right from the get-go. And then this is the cover it has now, which is actually one of my special edition covers that I eventually just migrated over to be the main cover on the series. So yeah, that is that. Back to this. So but mainly to show you, not to show you the covers themselves, but to show you that an Aeon 14 novel thing that I put in there. I knew right away I was going to build a big universe. And before I started writing, I worked on my setting. I worked on my setting a lot, because I have a pretty strong pet peeve with books. And that pet peeve is inconsistencies in time and distance. If you mess that one up for me, I will have a very hard time reading a series. And one of the ones that really got me was, I don't know who read Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks back in the day. One of the sort of beginning of the modern sword and sorcery kind of era books. It was a great book, and we had Alanon the Wizard, and they were at Paranor, the Druid's Keep, and they had to get to the city of Tyr really quickly, or at least Alanon did, because he had to stop bad shit from happening. And he got on his horse, and he rode east, north, along an entire freaking mountain range, then down south to the city of Tyr, and he did it one night. Normally, it would take them two, maybe even longer weeks to make it that distance. But he had like the light speed horse that one night. Never had it again. Never had it before. Just that one time. Lightspeed Horse, boom. Get to tier in. And the funny thing too is the author wrote that before he had maps. The maps were made for the series 3 or 4 books later. On the maps, there was actually a significantly shorter way to go. That was actually the long way based on the map because he didn't have everything ready. He didn't get all of his ducks in a row before he started writing, and it created this really annoying inconsistency in the books. Sword of Shannara was really good though, wasn't it, Brenda? So that was a thing that kind of bugged me. And there's been a lot of other things like that I've encountered in other books where, like Terry Goodkind, another Terry, in the Sword of Truth series. You know, in book 1, they go into the Midlands and they're trekking across the Midlands and they kind of go through an area where it literally says like, there's nothing much here, not much here. And they end up at like a village of the Mud People. And for whatever reason, they hang out with the Mud People for a really long time. There didn't seem to be any solid reason to stay there for so long, but they did. Which sort of smacks the author had no idea what to do next. So we're just hanging with the Mud People. And then in the later book, they come back through there, and in the area where there was nothing is now the largest kingdom in the Midlands. And it was huge and people everywhere and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, wow, kind of wild they missed that the first time they went through. And it like really pulls me out as a reader because I'm just like I'm in my mind I'm trying to build a picture of the world, right? I'm trying to get a feel for where everything is. And if I suddenly feel like, wait, did I get this wrong? It'd be like if for me, it's like if suddenly a character's hair color was different, or you know, they were described as tall and slender for the first half of the book, and then suddenly they're short and stocky afterward. And it's just like, what? Like I'm trying to build a picture of what's going on. Or like, you know, you're on the bridge of the Enterprise and they for first half of the book, they have a screen at the front, and then suddenly they have a holographic display in the middle, and everybody's sitting in a circle around it, like it's Battlestar Galactica. Like, you know, it messes you up if your mental image of the series gets warped. So I didn't want that, and I spent a lot of time building out my universe and thinking about like what sort of progression are people going to go through? What kind of like laws are going to be in place in here? You know, how is not so much how is the science going to work, because the science in my books is very real. It's like how will it progress? What discoveries will be made, and how will humans adapt and adopt those different discoveries? Adapt to and adopt. Yeah. And I built out a rule set for like the kinds of guns they would use, the kind of ships they would have, how they, you know, people lived on different planets and space stations and moons, all that sort of thing. And I built out this very large setting. It took me 2 years to build the setting. Actually, I did it between 2007 and 2009. I did a bit of writing in there, but mostly it was figuring out setting. And I researched like the kinds of engines that starships would have, different types of propulsion systems, a lot of, you know, research into how rockets work and whatnot. And you might think like, wow, Mal, that's extra nerdy and I'll never do that. But you might need to know all those things. You're writing fantasy and your main character is a blacksmith. You might actually really need to learn a lot about metallurgy and folding weapons and what kind of weapons they would have, why one sword's better than another, and all sorts of things. How long they last, you know, how will they hold their edge? Or maybe your main characters, I don't know, they're a potter, or they make whatever with clay or something like that, or they make porcelain. You might need to do a lot of research into how that works to understand it well, to tell a better story. Because the more you understand your setting and where your characters are and what kind of world they live in, the better you're going to be able to make them just make innately logical decisions. Like you're sitting there thinking, I know what my character should do next. But if you understood the setting, you'd be like, oh, well, they just did all of this. You can only keep that clay for that long before it starts to harden. I'm just pulling this out of the thin air. I don't know. But this thing won't work if you do it that long. They're going to have to go and get supplies because of that. Or they're going to have to do some sort of cleaning or maintenance or who knows what. Like once you understand the boundaries around your character, you close off a lot of options and the way forward becomes far more apparent. And so that's kind of how I write. I've got this really clear setting. And oftentimes if I've painted myself into a corner and I don't know what to do next, and my characters are just sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, playing a game of canasta. They're actually playing a game of canasta in one of my books right now. And I don't know where to take them next. It's because I didn't think through my setting well enough. It's not rich enough. And I have the fog of war is everywhere, and I don't know which direction to send them in because I don't know what is in that direction. And so the characters can't make informed decisions. it's like a lot of times if you were like, if you were to like be watching a movie or playing a video game, um, and the video game has to guide you through what the next step is going to be because you don't know the world the characters are in. I'm playing Dragon Age Veilguard right now, which is an amazing game. Um, Super happy about the way they've handled trans representation in that game. It is the best I've ever seen. Now, granted, I don't play a ton of games, but a lot of people who play more games are also saying that. But like, I don't know where to send my characters or what to have them do because I don't know the world. I didn't grow up in the world, right? The actual characters in the game grew up there. They will know all sorts of things. I don't know. So the game has to walk me through what my options are and kind of like spoon feed me some of the options. And but when it comes to us writing our books, we have to know the world because otherwise our characters are just sitting there saying, I don't know what to do. You created me like a month ago, you know? We have to be the ones that guide them and have them do what they do. So that's one of the things you need if you're going to pants a lot. You need to have this structured world that they live in, be it a small town where you've really mapped out what's in the town, or a massive universe like I have. Like, here's a crazy thing to think. Like, how many gas stations are there in a town of 14,000 people? How many restaurants? How many churches? How many cobblers? How many maid services are there going to be in a town of 14,000 people? If you've written your story, so there's one cafe in a town of 14,000 people, and you never put in the fact there's other cafes, that there's 70 restaurants or something like that, then you've actually kind of made a mistake. And you've created this view of the town that isn't complete enough, and you're missing out on these opportunities for your characters to have a richer experience inside of that town. So that's I grew up in a town of like 14,000 people. We had 70 churches and 70 restaurants. Now it was an agricultural area with a lot of oil stuff around, so there was actually a lot more services in the town than you might normally find. But that's a real scenario, right? Like, planning that out maybe is something you want to do. How many grocery stores are there going to be? How many furniture stores are there going to be? If you act like a town of 14,000 people as one furniture store, you've made a mistake and you haven't fleshed out the town well enough. And the more the town's fleshed out, the more the reader is going to feel like they're living in a real world. That's one of the things that Tolkien did so well, right? Lord of the Rings felt like a lived-in world. And that was why the series worked so well. And you can tell when you're reading a book and the world doesn't feel lived in, you can tell because the characters sort of just seem to be like pushed around by wherever the wind blows. They don't seem to know what they should do next because their author doesn't know the setting well enough. It's a pretty easy thing to pick out once you kind of know to look for it. So I did a lot of that work. And then I had to get to know my characters. I spent a lot of time getting to know my characters. My main character, Tanis, who is in about 40 some odd of my books, not always is the main character in all of those books, but I would say she's the series' main character. In the first book we encounter her in, she is in her 70s and she's been serving in the military for 50 years. People in my books live a lot longer than people do now. They live to about 400. So she's not even seen her first 100th birthday. So she's still pretty young by their standards. But she also has a lived experience that nobody in our current world has. Nobody has the body of a 20-year-old, 70 years old with 50 years of military service, of like actual like deployed combat experience. It's just not a thing. So I had to really sit and think about like what's she like, what's her upbringing like, how does she feel about different things, how's she going to react to different things. Something I do a lot of times if I'm writing a new group of characters is I sit them all down for dinner. And it's like, who helps, who doesn't help, who brings something, who just shows up, puts their feet on the table and leans back, who's watching the game in the other room and just like not talking with anybody. Who's the one that I don't know, is like the uncle at the table that says the things that perhaps they shouldn't be saying. Like, I get to know my characters like that because once I know my characters and know my setting, then I can kind of drop them in. And then the last thing I do for a given book is I create a North Star vision. I feel like I'm like almost like, am I still on? I've talked 9 minutes now and no one said anything, but I'm going for it. It's recorded, so it'll be okay. So I said a North Star. And this actually is actually how I always worked as a boss too, when I ran software development teams and creative teams and stuff like that, is we would have a vision. Here's where we want to be. We need some software that does XYZ, or we need a design or a product that does XYZ. Here's our tool set. here's our end goal. How do we get there? And when making things, awesome, great, Desiree. Thank you for saying that. And Jill's here listening too. Yay. Um, when making things, I realize that the people doing, I mean, this is actually a tenet of agile software development. The people doing the work have the best idea how to do the work. And I feel like that does actually translate to my characters. The characters know best how to move forward in the story, which of course requires me to know the characters inside and out, and then to know the setting that they're in. So I know where the guardrails are. I know where you can't go. And then that the path forward becomes very clear at that point. And the other thing that I have to do is every character in a scene has to want something, and I have to know where it is, what it is. And you're kind of like, what do you mean they have to want something? Like everybody has to want something. If they don't want something, then you don't know what to have them do in the scene, and they become a cardboard cutout that you just move around to have them say whatever they need to say at the time to drive the plot forward. But if all of your characters want something, then they're going to stay in character, and they're actually going to move the story forward in the way that real life moves forward. And sometimes that's in different directions at the same time, which makes the story feel more realistic. And that could be like, you could be on the bridge of a starship, right? And you're like, I don't know, what does the ensign at the helm want? And like, maybe he really wants to impress the captain. Maybe it's that was exciting. All of my Chrome windows just crashed. But am I back? All right. Hoeing is a vital skill. Hoeing ain't easy. All right, I think I'm back. Everything looks good. Numbers are counting. Um, so yeah, where was I going with this? We're talking about wanting something, or maybe it's so I mentioned Lower Decks and suddenly it crashed. It's like they're a ban on Star Trek on here. So if you haven't watched Lower Decks, it is some of the best Star Trek out there. It's a cartoon. It's amazing. It's in its last season. It's very sad. But anyway, if you're like one of the main characters from Lower Decks, that's something I can't remember her name because I'm terrible at this sort of thing. But she probably just wants to get the hell off the bridge and go goof around and have lunch or something like that. So if you know that thing, if you know what the characters want, then they're going to act in character, and they're going to be like behaving as though they have their own motivation. And that's what's going to make your story better, and it's going to help drive things forward. So that's a little bit of how like I write like an individual book without having a plot. And as I go writing the book, I do start to generate bullet points, and sometimes I have a few at the beginning. Like I need the characters to go here. I need character XYZ to do a certain thing. And as I write, I might open loops that I need to close. So some bullet points start to appear below my story, and they start to grow. And then hopefully, as I get toward the end of the book, the number of bullet points start to shrink. And my hair is just not cooperating today. So that's kind of how I roll with that. And I generally just follow a 3-act play scenario, and I'm all about rising action. And one of the ways I handle rising action too, and this is something that I think a lot of authors do intuitively, is there is a scene that drives the story forward, and then there's a scene that's reflective. And what you do is you have your rising action. There's a scene above the line, which is your story. You're driving the story forward. It's an action scene. Things happen, things change, and then a below the line scene that's about reflection and preparing for the next thing, and above, and then below, and above, and below, and above, and below, until you get up to the climax. It's kind of just how I do it. And then your denouement and everything after the climax. But how do I make things work building a bigger universe, stretching out beyond just the individual story? So one of the things that I do is at the beginning of every book, I write what happened last time. And if I'm really clever, I write it as soon as I'm done writing the prior book. So I finish writing a book and I write the previously in whatever series thing. And that way, when I dive into the next book, I know what's happening. I know what I like. My refresher, it's like 2 pages. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And I drive the story forward. I might even put a couple of bullet points in there, like don't forget to close this thread in the next book or something like that. Um, and the other thing I do that helps me out a lot that might not work for everybody, but maybe you could do it internally, is I have a date and a location at the top of every chapter, which works out well for my format, which um, really helps me like research my own books because I can just look back at them and be like, how long ago were my characters here, or were they in this system or that system? It's in the chapter title. It's really easy to find, so it makes it pretty easy for me to research my own books. Plus, a bunch of my fans are ridiculous, and they know too. I can just ask them. Um, so that's one of the things I can do. And then the other thing is I do keep an overall timeline of sorts that helps me out a bit. And actually, my readers have actually created a better timeline. So sometimes I'll actually look at the timeline that my readers made. Let's see, readingorder.info, Aeon 14. He said this horizontal. I liked it better when it's horizontal, but that's all right. Share screen. But they're also able to build this because I gave them dates on everything. So they've got all the books. The first segment of books are all very linear, and then things start to branch off and stuff's happening at the same time. And you can sort of see, like this particular book spans a time frame where 2 other series actually happen. And that kind of branches out to a certain point. And you can start to see like some crazy lines happen where stuff's going back and forth and all sorts of things, which is pretty cool. This is called a subway map, by the way. And you can actually, there's some software out there for making subway maps of different things. And then a lot of the stuff actually kind of like pulls back together at the very end again. So that was something that helped, was having readers that did that. But I also have my own version on my website. Books, the master list. And readers really want this. Once you start getting a lot of books, they want a master list of all of the books. That's something you need to actually have to help your readers. Because one of the problems you'll run into when you write a massive universe is readers don't know where to go. They're like, I don't know what to read next. So anything you can do to help them know where to go next is really important. So I list out the date for the story, whether or not it's an omnibus, what book number it is in a given series, and then they can kind of go through. And they like the fact this is a table format because a lot of them just take this and they dump it into Excel and go from there. So many books all cruising along in there. So that's some of the things I do as well from a reader standpoint. And then one of the things I do to sort of like continue to expand the universe is I keep a really keen eye out for the characters that my readers want to know more about or storylines they want to know more about. And then I'll oftentimes branch off that way. And then the third, that's kind of obvious, right? We should all be doing that all the time. The other thing I do is I brought in co-authors. I think about 35 of my books have been written with co-authors. I've said this before, I don't think co-authors necessarily accelerate you, but they can really help when the well's dry, or you just need more lived experience. Like I'm trying to create this massive universe with all these different characters and points of view and everything. I can't do that. I don't know enough of what it's like to be a bunch of different people, to be able to start to create this truly diverse cast of characters. So I had to bring co-authors. I needed people from other walks of life with different experiences, with different goals, motivations, all sorts of things to help me build out this universe. And that did help quite a bit. Less, like I said, I don't find co-authors to be faster. I just find that they help you make a better story than you would have made on your own. So don't go into co-authors looking for that. And my best co-authors, I feel like I got from my readership. I went to my readers and I'm like, who wants to write in my series? And got people that way. Some of them I grabbed them like, you are writing a book. Like you're good at this. You should be writing a book. And I dragged them in. So that's something you can do. And the great thing too is like if you try to bring, if you've started to build a big universe and you've got like 20, 30 books and you want to bring a co-author in, they can't read all those books. I shouldn't say that there's some people, some other existing authors I brought in that were actually fabulous too. I feel like the readers did the best from a like me managing the story kind of thing because they already knew all the stuff. Whereas other authors, they don't have the time to read 40 books before they co-author a book. So I had to kind of give them cliff notes and then go sometimes rework more things as a result of them just not having the backstory the way that my readers did. So definitely something to consider as well. Jeremy says, similar here with the bullet points, and I'll mind map sometimes, expand the bullet points and paragraphs. That makes sense. I'm not that far from you with number of books. This rewriting has slowed me to a crawl. I can imagine it has. Yeah, rewriting is brutal, Monique. Um, so that's some of the thoughts on how I did it. I'm also a huge map person. I think that maps tell you so much about the world that people live in, because everything about how our cultures have developed, how humans have worked with and against each other on our planet, has to do with resources. Where are the resources? Where are they abundant? Where are they not abundant? What kind of resources do you need to do X, Y, and Z? If you need to make product A, do you have everything you need to make product A, or are you going to have to form an alliance with or take over people that have component C that has to go into product A, right? Like, that's what so much of our history has been about. So if you make a map, you start to understand who has what are their major imports, what are their major exports, um, who are they going to form alliances with, who do they need, who do they not need. Maybe if you're doing small town, not a big deal, you can kind of figure a lot of that out. But maybe you still need the map to know how long it takes to get from Bill's diner to Mary's house. You know, when she calls in a hurry, or he calls in a hurry and needs them quickly. So you know, like, it's going to take 7 minutes to get there. Absolute best. A lot can happen in 7 minutes. I have to deal with that, or however long it ends up being. So I really feel like maps are super important. And actually, maps are what caused me to recreate my universe in a different way after I first made it, because I started like really researching our star system that we live in here. I don't call it the solar system in my books, because then, like, what are you in the Sirius R system and the Alpha Centauri R system? It's called the Sol system. So, and they don't say there's also other things I do too, like in my books, like they don't call the sun a sun. I mean, they do on Earth, and in this soul system, in the soul system, they'll call it the sun, but everywhere else, they call it by the star's name, or they call it the stellar primary if they're not from the area and don't have the know the colloquial term for the star's name and stuff like that. I don't even use words like inch to say like they inched along, because I want to make sure like they wouldn't use inches. Everything's metric at that point. So I'm very particular about a lot. Like, my world building gets down to that level, because I want my characters to always be like true to themselves and consistent in how they behave. I don't say like computer. I don't say monitor. It's always a screen or a display. You know, I use terms that make everything seem unique and different, and that's all. That's a sort of a side note. But the maps were really important, because as I started researching the Sol system, I discovered that we probably have about 200 dwarf planets in our star system. We have 8 major planets and about 200 dwarf planets. Um, and so far, I think 6 or 7 have been formally recognized as dwarf planets, and a lot are candidates that we still have to kind of like decide if they're actually proper dwarf planets or not. Um, and uh, and the other interesting thing I kind of realized is that there's a lot of resources just floating around out there, and at a certain point, it's impractical to actually dig up your backyard to get all of your resources when you can just get them floating around and don't have to dig up anything. And in fact, why would you do most of your production at the bottom of a gravity well on a world with a corrosive atmosphere, because oxygen is a corrosive thing, when you could just do your production in space, get your resources in space, get your production in space. Energy is easier to get in space, and just do everything there. So that kind of came to the realization, like, wow, humans probably won't live on planets that much in the future, because it's kind of impractical. You're better off living in space. And that sort of defined a lot of how my world building went from there as well. So a lot of things like that I really dug into to create this world. And the other thing I did too is, for me, for building a big universe, is I thought big. Most sci-fi doesn't think big enough. And I based this off of how quickly the United States built the Pacific Fleet in World War II. You know, when the United States put the Pacific Fleet out there after D-Day, because when D-Day happened, that was the largest fleet in human history. And then with less than a year later, the United States put out a larger fleet into the Pacific Ocean, and did that very quickly, like super quickly. I mean, it wasn't immediately a larger fleet, but it got there. After like rescuing MacArthur from Bataan with a PT boat, you know, kind of thing. Like, it was pretty hardcore. So I thought about, like, wow, if you have like machines running by AIs just strip mining a moon to build starships, you wouldn't be talking about hundreds of ships in a fleet. You'd be talking about millions of ships in a fleet. And resources are wildly abundant in space. Like, Mercury, the planet Mercury, is actually an iron core of what was once a larger planet, where the rest of the planet kind of got knocked off, and now the iron core is all that's left floating out there. You could build 130,000 Death Stars with Mercury. So the resources are abundant. So I actually kind of did a bunch of math on population growth and using, like, if you had a bunch of AI powered machines building starships for 100 years, how many would you have, kind of thing. And then I said, oh my God, those numbers are too big to comprehend, and scaled everything back. But like that sort of like world building and thinking and researching and like just sort of exploring and learning caused me to create this rich universe that feels real, because it's not like what we live in now. It stretches out beyond that and has attributes that we would never have thought of, because I spent a lot of time thinking about how the future would work. Um, and that, and then, you know, now that I've got this setting and I've got like these wild, crazy, imaginative things that are happening in this setting, like book one opens up after they move Pluto. Pluto is in orbit of Jupiter because the Jovians bought Pluto from the scattered disk that needed some money, kind of thing. Like wild stuff happens, but it's all based on like on actual science. And then I'm dropping my characters into this, and because I know the settings so well, my characters so well, they're behaving realistically, and that's kind of how I did it. And I have a pretty good memory, so I stored a lot of stuff in my head. It's not as good as it used to be, but luckily AI is getting really good at being able to read your books, and then you can ask the AI questions about your own books. So that's something that I'm pretty excited about. I think within the next year or so, it'll be super easy to do that sort of thing, to just like load your books into Notion or maybe into Claude or something like that, and then just ask the AI questions about your books, and it can get a lot of it. Mine's a little bit trickier because some of my characters are alive for like 6,000 years, and their stories, who they are as people, changes dramatically over that time frame. So I'm still going to probably have to deal with some inconsistencies in that regard. But that's kind of how I've done it. Hopefully, there's been some nuggets in there that have been useful for people. There's a lot more. I've done it. I've never actually recorded it, but I have done a presentation on how I actually built my world. It's like 3.5 hours long. So obviously this is the Cliff Notes version of it. It involved me like drawing a map on a whiteboard and then like describing the cultures that are going to come from it. And it's kind of like I do it differently every time. It's kind of this cool ad hoc thing that I do. Maybe someday I'll actually do that, you know, as a webinar that we can record or something. Oh, I'm glad, some golden nuggets. That's awesome, Monique. Happy to help. I do have a call coming up in 8 minutes though, and I need to get more coffee and more. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna get more Baileys. That might not be a good idea, but a little more coffee to keep me going here. But it was great chatting with you guys. Thanks for hanging out while I went on about all of this. And if you're regarding like the events of this week, you know, the depending on your viewpoint, the dire or good news that happened this week. I don't know. I know very few people, even people who are in the United States, the result went the way they wanted. I think a lot of people are not as excited as they thought they would. I think a lot of people want to be really mad, and now they're like, oh. So anyway, that aside, if you're distressed about the industry and what might be happening as a result of the election, I did a afternoon tea with Mal yesterday. So if you didn't catch that, you can go rewatch that. I talk a bit about what I think is going to happen industry wise. A lot of people are concerned, and I think some of the concerns are valid, and some of the concerns are like maybe. But if you need like a bit of a pick me up, I've got that from yesterday as well. Yeah, you don't. Well, I mean, you do have to worry because you're like, you know, you're in Eastern Europe, Monique. So I imagine that what happens in the American election actually could have a pretty big impact on you, depending on choices that are made. But yeah, winter is coming. Except for here, it was 81 degrees here yesterday, Fahrenheit, like 30, not 30, 26. I think 26 Celsius is what that is. But anyway, if you want to hear my chat yesterday, it's in our group. It's wherever you're watching this right now. It'll also be there too. So you can watch that if you want. And then I will not be here doing lunch with Mel next week because I'll be in Vegas. So if you are in Vegas as well, find me. And I would be happy to hang with you and chat. I don't have a lot going on most days. I'm going to be. We're a vendor, so we'll be in the place for vendor day in the vendor hall, I guess. The main conference room, and then I have a presentation on Facebook ads 2:00 on Thursday. But other than that, my calendar is pretty open, so I'll just be hanging out a bunch. Yeah, I'll totally see you in Vegas, Jeremy. Look forward to it. All right, folks, have yourselves a great Thursday, pardon me, and an awesome weekend. We'll see you later.